Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, present here and those who joined us online. We are beginning the debate on gender equality in Lithuania yesterday and today. Why it is still normal to lift girls' skirts? We are not going to speak about the skirts, but gender stereotypes, why they are negative, and what was the development of gender stereotypes in Lithuania. We will first of all give the floor to Human Rights Center representative who will present the newest study on gender stereotypes consumed by youngsters on the in the media, social media. What are the practical stereotypes used by young people, and why young people? Thank you. We decided to analyze this area because naturally we have the expectation of progressiveness in terms of young people becoming more liberal. Therefore, we're interested in analyzing in reality what is happening, what is important for young people in terms of gender equality, what type of content they consume. This is a place or the space where young people spend a lot of time, and therefore it was important for us to see what was going on there. You will soon present the result, but could you name which thing surprised you most? Well, actually, I was saddened. Well, we consider young people to be a light in our future and the change of generations. But you are speaking about the gender stereotypes. Is it true that boys still lift skirts in schools? Well, not necessarily directly, but indirectly, yes. Could you present the results to us? As you have already mentioned, gender stereotypes in social medias was organized in the content consumed by young people. Our aim was to see what is happening in social media, because this is one of the spaces that young people spend a lot of time in. We wanted to identify the gender roles and stereotypes, the persistent stereotypes in the content created by Lithuanian young people and the Lithuanian language content. We wanted to better understand the life that young people live in order to react to different issues. We made a quality content analysis, and the scope of the sample was quite broad. We interviewed young people. We accessed accounts on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. The period of analysis is from January 2023 to June 2024, and this content is oriented to people in the age group between 15 and 19. Well, the general insight before presenting the results, in general, the category of femaleness and maleness in social media is very diverse. We analyze different situations, advertisements, and life moments. We saw at universal experience of young people, young men and women who differently see and experience the world. And we noticed this difference. And when we use those strict categories, we cannot avoid the stereotypes. I would like to show you some examples that are very simple. So we put everything into categories. This is the example of men being single and in relationship. And another example, the colors that being typically male or female. Now I would like to show you an example and mention. Well, I had to resort to censorship because there was a lot of obscene language there. So I want to warn you against that.
Bus daug romantikos, meilės, gražios muzikos, bet kodėl jis šypsosi, kai aš pasiūlau filmo nebūna toks laimingas.
Nusivesiu į kiną, pamaitinsiu popkornai.
I will take her to the cinema and buy popcorn to her. Oh, the window, the mirror is dirty. Oh, nice cat, nice cat. Oh, the film was full of activity. Please, please, let's go to this film.
Reklama.
This was the advertisement of a film which was full of data that I analyzed. It was very concentrated, but the aspects can be seen in other formats as well. So what is my point? In general terms, we can see the different view of the world. Women and young women are associated very much with the household chores, beauty. This is their natural sphere of activity, including beauty, fashion, makeup, sexuality, some nice, cute things such as cats, sexuality, and for guys, sports, cars, games, money, responsibility for finances, expectations to be the provider, orientation towards action, activity, courage, carelessness, and also inability to act in household. And we also see differences in emotional intellect and ways of thinking. Boys are often seen as infantile, having a very simple way of thinking, and young women tend to be too emotional, think quite deeply, but undecided, unknowing what they want. And the quotation of one of the content consumers that we are girls, why are you asking us? We don't know what we want. Well, I've deleted the worst photograph that is worth censorship, but there are some extreme cases, and we have to speak about them because they are very greatly followed, and young people take very much interest in that. And this is a very extreme case of female stereotype. So femininity is seen here as sexual attractiveness, body forms, emotional, and for men, masculinity, strength, and body forms. And this seems to be quite shocking for people, but it is worth stressing that it is related to cultural norms and social expectations. And it is important to stress that young people have a different relation to that type of content, and some resort to bullying and to joking And we have some cases of joking, making jokes of something, ridiculing. And this is the example of a young man who said that he was arrested in Laisvės alėja, and he started making push-ups during his arrest. And why it is important to speak about femininity and masculinity? Because it presupposes certain attitude of young men towards young women. And this is related to objectification of females. And the quotation is that if you are not satisfied by a woman during you driving a long distance, it means that she doesn't love you. And there are many situations so when somebody does something, and this is a very situation that happens very often. And women tend to be emotionally insecure, persistent imagining of apparently non-existent things, suspicions, and at the same time, young men are presented as those unable to recognize conflict situations and to react to them adequately. And the conflict dissatisfaction which with each other is presented as an axis in relations. And this is very much related to the situations of a father and mother relationship. Younger people like to create sketches of acting on the role of a mother and a father, and they get into conflict. I want to show you an illustration, but I will have to skip it due to the lack of time. Very often, a mother is portrayed as excessively sensitive, constantly dissatisfied, and the father is showed as a non-existent, careless, strict, consuming alcohol, and compensating his absence with money. And parental relationships are often depicted as based on dissatisfaction with each other, humiliation, and nicknaming. Another thing that I want to mention is the meaning of stereotypes, speaking about sexual violence, domestic violence, harassment culture. And we've noticed a very clear stereotype that can be related to the spread of sexual violence and domestic violence, and the presentation or the portrayal of women as overly complicated, meaning that she should not be understood or cannot be understood. In the context of the culture of harassment, this is very dangerous. This is an example. A popular content creator makes a joke on flirting of women, and she presents it as something very repulsive by saying, "What are you looking at?" But this is presented as flirting. Meaning that this type of attitude does not necessarily means no. And also, irrespective of boundaries, in order to show the attention still exists, I analyzed accounts of 3 youngsters, and they would present certain interviews or situations. And very often, a girl is interviewed in those videos, and I will show you the way they communicate. If you have 30,000, I have 35,000. Well, the question to my women, what is your size of the breast? Do you go to church? You really should go to church. Do you choose to drink sour milk or Iran? Have you tried vodka? Would you like to drink milk directly from the cow? And similar conversations follow. So this is a certain type of communication where boundaries are not kept, and a woman is forced to withstand those questions of a sexual character. And this is considered to be a joke or showing of attention. But it can also be evaluated as quite problematic. And finally, women and young women are very often being criticized for dressing in inappropriately or drinking alcohol. And they are often seen as manipulative and provoking. Two content creators, for example, are watching the reality show and are commenting on that. Well, women are making jealousy scenes and are waiting for certain reactions. And I want to show you another example. I want you.
Nelauk sekmadienio.
I'm sick and tired of your answer. Don't wait for Sunday. This is the advertisement of a very popular online show, and young people really watch this show. And this video shows certain things and has certain implications that a woman is a giver and the man is a taker of sexual relationship. And this is in the light of man inability to control his needs. While I'm moving towards the end, I will skip one topic. And this is a classical topic that we very generally expect when we speak about social media and consumption of social media is the representation of the body. So this is something that we find online, a lot of sexualized and beautiful body and makeup, and all these traits are considered to be a part of being a woman. And there's this a very popular saying that you have to turn from a ugly duckling into the swan. And there's a lot of sexualized body presented that raises certain expectations. I would also like to share one example of one content creator. She shares not only her sexualized body, but she also raises her concerns of being imperfect. Even if she is very sexy, she still has some drawbacks. I hope that this was not too apocalyptic, because it was not my intention to present this. These are the tendencies, but we have many other different examples.
Ačiū Kristinai Rukaitė iš Lietuvos.
Thank you, Ms. Rukaitė. From the Human Rights Center, let me now invite Vilma Gabrieliūtė the expert at the Office of the Equal Opportunities Ombudsperson. Emilis Mikulskis, Vice President of the Lithuanian School Student Union. Equal Opportunities Sexuality Educator and PhD candidate at the Institute of Educational Sciences, Vilnius University. And Ms. Ieva Balčiūnė, PhD researcher specializing in the history of women and children, the social and cultural history of the Soviet Union. So let me invite you all to the podium. So we can draw a superficial primary conclusion that apparently nothing is changing. Our parents tend to maintain the same wording when talking to their children, and apparently those stereotypes are being handed down from generation to generation. So why is it so? Well, I would like to express an opposing opinion. As Christina mentioned, this is not a single story on what the content that our youngsters are consuming. There are more liberal profiles available on social media as well. But the issue of conservative content is quite difficult and painful. This is the kind of top content that is easy to produce and copy. It's always easy to maintain the same convenient content. You don't need to change much the old age discourses. And it is very often the case that young people don't understand how effective those discourses are and how much they contribute to repeating abusive relationships and roles of relationship. Because this is often contributing to the different attitudes towards body images. This is a very convenient content, and young people don't have room to challenge, so to say, their views on things that seem quite natural and their views on other types of discourses. Emilis, you recently graduated, and now you represent the Lithuanian School Student Union. So could you tell us why is it so that young people consume stereotypes without fully understanding the damage they do, and what needs to change for them to understand what they're all about? And we didn't see even the worst censored cases in the presented study. Well, I believe I won't be able to address all those issues, but what we can do, well, we always tend to look into the content prevalent in school or on social media. And if you listen to that content constantly and then you go back at home, you will hear quite a different discourse. Let's say if I see on Facebook that one girl is allowed to marry another girl, the school heard quite a simple fact that simply you can do whatever you want if you want that, but this already presents a certain conflict for the parents to be addressed. So we can believe that some kind of information will dominate at school and it will address the issue in a way. But we're not talking about the teaching of parents as well. We see the skills that have been formed in our children for many years, and we continue to do the same. And then again, we have been living for the past 30 years in freedom, and we still see that those issues continue to be addressed in the remainder of the Western world as well. So it's a good thing that we are progressing, but perhaps we would like to see things being addressed in a more just way at a greater pace. It's quite difficult when our school children are unable to address different discourses at school. But it is possible actually to do that. Well, as for the environments tend to differ. Let's take this one. There are people of different opinions here, and it is easier to discuss them. But those that we've seen in the content depicted in the study presented here, perhaps the youngsters presented there perhaps are not aware of the availability of the different content. We have a lot of good examples that could praise schools as the ones that promote a positive approach, but there are also those examples that demonstrate that there are still schools that are stuck in the 80s and 90s. Vilma, why is it so that following stereotypes is bad, and what kind of issues derive from that? Well, my colleagues have already mentioned how that is reflected throughout our lives. It's quite a broad topic. Perhaps I would be able to share the experience of the implementation of a project conducted in cooperation with the Office of the Equal Opportunities Ombudsperson. We've come up with a plan how to reach out to schools. We've come up with a plan to have a discussion with parents, with school children, with teachers. But whenever we came to a particular school, we realized that we had teachers primarily, who were not aware of some of those things that we've discussed. And yes, we did talk with the teachers first and foremost, which shows that we don't have a consistent plan for addressing equal opportunities issues in the education system. What was also interesting to note is that during the first meetings with the school communities and with parents, we realized that people are unable to observe gender stereotypes that exist. Well, for example, cases when people are being nicknamed if they fail to meet certain norms, not to mention sexual harassment manifestations as more severe cases. So, as for the effect on our children, apparently we are creating a culture where abusing others becomes a norm. And then again, violence, gender-based violence, is again something that is not taken into consideration. And then family or professional obligations, these are also included in this quite broad topic. So going back to the project that I've mentioned, and if teachers are listening, they should bear in mind that it is important to reflect on the general situation that exists. We've also surveyed the teachers and the pupils in the project, and we've analyzed their viewpoints. And we looked into their responses on certain current affairs, and we've observed that there's a lot of normalization of bullying. To some, it seemed quite normal that if you are not happy with what your date is saying or doing, it's quite normal to slap him or her. It is normal to be jealous or envious of your partner. So we've noticed such cases. So in addition to that, we've also conducted interviews of our pupils at a later stage to see what has changed over the time. And I've even noted some of those conclusions. And apparently, their approach to masculinity and femininity has changed over time, because there were more pupils who began thinking that girls are just as smart as boys. There were less pupils who believed that it was the duty of girls to look beautiful and good. There were less of those people who portrayed certain stereotypical behavior. And if we think about domestic violence and violence against women, the normalization of the victim phenomenon was quite prevalent. So in the beginning, there were quite a few pupils who believed that girls are to be blamed for the abuse that they suffer because of their provocative attire. And statistics again confirm that every third resident in Lithuania maintained the same attitude. And apparently, this approach has changed over time in the implementation of the project. But have you thought of the ways how to change those mindsets in your work? Well, the situation regarding the gender equality in Lithuania is quite fluctuating because in one school the situation might differ from the one in another school. We tend to educate our teachers on inappropriate behavior. In the meantime, the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport might convey a different approach towards the same situation. So there are different interpretations towards the same situations.
Regionai.
Ieva, you investigated the Soviet times and our region, and also stereotypes and attitudes towards men and women. We live in the 21st century now. Do we have a real difference from those times and now? Well, when you study the Soviet times, you don't see the attitudes towards men and women, but you see the representation of that. And we do not hear the real discussion when we investigate the past. We only see the representation of that, which is presented for consumption. During the Soviet times, certain things were used for political reasons or for political goals. For example, a targeted polarization between Western values and of rotten West, corrupt policies of the West with female freedoms and things that are unacceptable for the Soviet society, which is pure, mature, and emancipated. But this is a very targeted political campaign in terms of presentation, and we don't hear the realistic conversation there. In terms of changes, we still see so many weaponization of such aspects and values, and polarization here is much more important than the one we see on the screen. Well, I'm a teacher, so this is how I contact with young people. In Vilnius University, we have a course for the first year students on gender in culture, and different students choose this course from different subjects and disciplines. And I've noticed in 3 years that students have learned to give the answers that we expect of them. And we face the problem of not knowing their real opinion, their real vision, because they translate things that they think that we expect from them. And we want to see if they're aggressive or not. So this is an ambiguous situation. And even in this social bubble, in the university, year one in the university, representatives of different subject studies. So this shows that the students adapt to the situation and give the narrative that is expected of them, because it is more simple. Well, not because of that, because young people have the imagination that they are in a hostile environment where they cannot be truly open, even if they have a different opinion. So it means that they cannot voice their opinion if it is different. They're afraid of some reaction, of negative reaction. And I think this difference is a bit different than the one we expect. Vilma, you said when you worked with students and teachers, you've noticed that there's no plan how we should teach young people on stereotypes. Aquila, is it true that we don't have any plan? We had the life skills program that was being criticized very much, that was being reviewed, and there was a lot of conflict, and we nearly had a civil war on that. Is it true that we don't have a plan? How should we move forward? Well, in the public space, we heard many things about the life skills life skills program were untrue. As an educator, I'm presented as the one who is happy about this program and curriculum. I think that I want to have such a curriculum in schools that would involve fighting stereotypes. But this area takes only 10% of all the curriculum. So sexual education does not take that much place in the life skills curriculum. And there are no clear objectives in that program so that educators know what they are targeting at, for example, reducing gender stereotypes. So where can we find them? They do not exist. We are addressing the problem that nobody wants to solve. Yes, we have education targets, educational objectives in the educational program on increasing tolerance of young people, on fostering healthy love. But these are empty phrases because young people are quite conservative and they have their own interpretation of tolerance and love-based relations. And the participants of this forum have a different vision on that, and the Ministry of Education does not take the leadership role to explain what path we should take. We have very different points that are being targeted at, but we don't have very concrete objectives that would be clearly defined. Speaking about the life skills curriculum, I wonder how the implementation monitoring will be carried out, because the curriculum is so wide and schools have the right to choose priority areas in this curriculum. It is quite logical that a large part of schools will choose topics such as making salad, healthy salad, rather than choosing the topic of safe sex or going on today how to say no, how to navigate in a difficult sexual situation. And I still teach in Vilnius University life skills course for future teachers of life skills in schools. I hear that a large part of schools that are afraid of opposition from parents try to exclude the sexuality topics from their life skills curriculum. And the Ministry of Education very often chooses to ignore that. And we see a certain avoidance of addressing the problem. Emilis, your task is to take care of schools and the topics, introduction of topics that have to be addressed and debated in schools. Why don't you criticize the former Minister on Education? Well, we had to do this in the very beginning of the legislature. I had 20 different interviews in that time, and there was a voting on making life skills optional subject at school. And this life skills curricula has become too abstract. We have certain competences defined, but we don't have the final objective of fostering the main objectives or achieving the main goal. And this can be seen in different curricula. And in life skills, this can be seen even more vividly. In many schools, we have life skills classes. Some schools have a teacher who comes once in a week and teaches the subject. But there are some schools that don't have such classes because some schools decide not to do that. Schools choose not to have this subject. Sometimes school communities are against having such a subject, or we have some cases when students do not attend such classes. What is the problem? Sometimes we have one teacher dedicated to that, but some schools invite external teacher or expert visiting teacher for teaching this subject. And sometimes people teach this subject, but they are not competent to do that. I think that we should have set lists of people who should not be allowed to come and teach in schools. But we should have a system where we could define what type of people could speak about one or another subject. And we don't have a sufficient number of people to teach in 900 schools. This is a very large number, even for external teachers. And another aspect is the training of teachers of life skills subject. And I do not know whether we have a 5-year course of that. The development of their competences is a lifelong learning process. We have knowledge of schools that teach the subject and teach certain topics. And previously, we used to have a prevention commission where we would meet and discuss these matters, but we would allocate only 30 minutes for that. Finally, we have the product, and this was our aim. And finally, we had to compromise on certain aspects such as quality. And also, we see certain loopholes in that. And another moment is that we don't have the follow-up on that, and the current government program does not speak about life skills subject, and we provided certain proposals on the topics to be included in the life skills subject, but these were not included and our proposals were not taken into consideration. So I believe that this issue will come to a halt and will not be further addressed.
Prašom.
Ačiū. Aš esu Augustė Dudu.
Thank you. My name is Augusta Dudurytė. I represent the Ministry of Social Security and Labor. We have been talking about the kind of content that promotes gender stereotypes, but we know from foreign research that abusive content perhaps is more prevalent among males as opposed to females, although stereotypes can be seen in both kinds of content. And certainly there are other factors to be noted, such as the fact that more males voted for Donald Trump compared to the female votes during the presidential elections in the US. So my point is, where as a society have we made a mistake in order to avoid these stereotypes and improve tolerance, so that we make sure that our guys do not stay behind in terms of this fight against stereotypes, gender stereotypes?
Supratau. Taip. Norėčiau dabar, kad mes turėtumėm 3 valandas.
Well, I would like to have 3 hours for this difficult debate. Anyway, I will try to make a couple of important points. First of all, those stereotypes that we see among adults as well as among teenagers are predetermined by a certain algorithm. So this is no news that those algorithms fascinate guys more with the stereotypes that are anti-feminist, anti-equality. So the algorithms give this kind of content for men mainly. This is the kind of content that men are more exposed to. In the meantime, girls are more exposed to #MeToo, LGBT rights supportive content, and so on. Certainly, it's not about flowers and rainbows, because there are also different algorithms that are geared towards producing the kind of content for girls where men are presented as abusers, as innate abusers. And very often we talk with our students of this example of last spring, that memes on what you would rather encounter in the forest, a guy or a bear, was trending. And so certainly girls mainly responded that it should be a bear rather than a guy. So whenever I think about the understanding of masculinity among teenagers, I realize that there's a huge gap between the older generation and our teenagers that can be observed in the content of social media. It would be great if our teachers had the opportunity to have a debate on some controversial, quite radical online profiles that the youngsters are following with no fear, because it is important to occur in the same room where these controversial ideas are presented from different perspectives. Female positions have been dominating gender equality debates for quite some time now. Pay gap, domestic abuse, these were the topics that were mostly emphasized on the part of women, whereas emotional deprivation, a longer life expectancy, emotional health and shortages in this respect. These were just some of the aspects presented as the drawbacks of gender inequality on the part of men. And when it comes to sex education, usually these classes are related to education on menstruation, and guys do not want to be educated on that, and they would prefer to play football. And this is where they fail to contemplate gender identities. And so it seems that apparently stereotypes tend to affect women more than men. But this is the result of our failure to involve men into these discussions. And one key indicator, which I believe tells us a lot, is exactly that. Yeah, but from the historical perspective, could you answer that question? Why is it so that our men are lagging behind from that Western type of understanding on stereotypes? Well, I believe this is the consequence of a very long process. I fully agree with what Aquila has said, but I could also add that psychologized gender discourses is also very prevalent nowadays. Let's say we tend to discuss the existence of certain male and female psychologized profiles online, which emphasizes the existence of gender stereotypes. It's certainly quite entertaining when men who are more in the know educate other less aware men how they can make sure that they keep women in control. And there are still people in the 21st century who would pay money to others who would teach them that they should not give in to women at homes. But all of that is based on a certain psychology where a particular order must exist in relations. And this is all dependent on certain innate abilities. Whenever you open, let's say, a book on sex, so to say, education from the 60s, you would find the same things, where psychologically the nature of man is that of a hunter, one that is difficult to contain, purpose driven. And the same content continues to be used nowadays in various forms. And it is used not only among teenagers, but also among middle aged people. Okay, but then again, why is it still prevalent? Why this content is still prevalent? Well, nobody knows. Well, I have had a vision as I was listening to Ieva. I've managed to look at things from a perspective of a young boy. As I recalled my childhood, I realized that whenever I had to meet someone as a child, I had to firmly hold someone's hand and saying hello. Whenever I had to deal with some kind of conflict, I was intimidated to cry, not to show weakness. So, where all of that could have led us to? If we segregate things into boyish and girlish things, so all of that made me feel sad. Perhaps, yes, we do not focus on the stereotypes related to boys, but we do need to reflect on that. Not to get lost in our discussions, I would like us to stress that women are also affected by stereotypes. There are many women who support stereotypical ideas that men should serve women, that men should take care of them. Yes, and that it is my duty as a woman to take care of children. So it is not only men that maintain this discourse. So that's how our brains function. We function in terms of categories. We tend to segregate things into categories. And the same can be observed in all sorts of discourses, and we fail to address this issue properly. And you constantly ask, why is it so? But this is because we lack these discussions. Well, we do have these discussions, but then we tend to digress and fail to derive certain consequences. And society tends to be annoyed with these discussions. Yes, but let's not forget that the content on social media shows that it is not an exact representation of reality. We see more exaggerated points of view there. Students that I encounter in my work, these are more reflexive people. These are people who tend to see their parents less. Yes, and as society, we don't have enough room for such discussion. There's more room for arguing. That's what social media enables us, which is to argue about the different ideas, but we lack the room for welcoming different ideas. The culture of bullying in our discussion cultures is thriving. Any more questions? Yes, Henrika Lilija Vasilauskienė, please. Lilija Henrika Vasilauskienė, Women's House, an organization that provides support to women suffering domestic violence and abuse. We have been working in the field since 1996. That was a very proper question, why men fail to grasp their identity as a man. Certainly, we live in families and in a family established culture. We are aware of the same as in government's programs, as well as school programs and the family environment that are all related to this topic. But to this day, we still don't have equality programs in place. In general, if we were to rely on our international commitments, we were to have women's progress programs that would enable the progress in our society and bridging of the pay gap, reducing domestic violence, and increasing the number of women in decision-making positions. And so our younger generation tends to see the fulfillment of those stereotypes and perpetration of those stereotypes. And so there is no reflection on the effect of those stereotypes on society. But you have already answered your own question. We've elected a government that lacks women, so how can we seek some kind of women's progress program if the electorate has elected mainly men to the parliament? Well, what you are saying is part of populism, and ensuring gender equality is the job of the Ministry of Social Security and Labor. I truly appreciated what the representative of the ministry has said, that if we don't have more women in decision-making positions, if the laws are gender neutral, they establish the dominance of one gender. So gender-sensitive politics, gender-sensitive budgeting is a must. And let's go down to the municipal level. Do we have a single municipality that has in its strategic plans gender equality measures? I say no. Do we know anything about the support for women's organizations? And I've done projects into the field. Many municipalities believe that they are not allowed to support such organizations, even though our laws contain such provisions. So women are forced to deal with the glass ceiling. Their competence is mainly attributed to the NGO sector, although this is the least capable sector, and we lack municipal policy that would primarily contribute to changing the situation. So our government warns itself against psychologizing stereotypes, but it fails to request certain decisions. Thank you very much. And let us move on to another question. We have been discussing for now different problems. Don't you feel that we should be left desperate, simply leave those questions aside and just have a cup of coffee? Vilma is an expert addressing a number of issues. Aquila is working with children. Ieva is addressing a number of different issues. So, Emilis, so what? Schools might selectively choose certain addressing certain issues, but the situation is in general tragic. So, what can we do about that?
Why in the 21st century we don't have this what you are speaking about? Last week, Žemaitaitis was very popular on the TikTok and the National Union, and the most trending things. Well, this is a charisma, political charisma, when you have a very slow person who is very boring. He's not very charismatic, but if you have somebody who is shouting, he becomes very trending and popular. Well, we have to define our goals, but these goals have to be achieved by some measures, and they should not be based on some personal initiatives or goodwill initiatives. And this way we will not be moving forward. We will be making one step forward and two steps back. Some changes will be adopted, but it all goes back to whether we want to change that, whether we have leadership, because everything boils down to leadership here. We have many areas where we have strategies for 2050, 2048. we're moving towards this. Of course, you cannot define everything in equality in terms of quality. But sometimes we think that, well, we complain and then we go back to our own activities. But still, by moving forward a little bit, we can make some positive steps. We have some people who are trained, some people grasp this information, and this will be much slower. But what can be done? We can continue our efforts, but we need more system here and more help and empowering of existing measures. Rima, don't you think that you have to resign from your position and to join me in educations on making Christmas decorations, decorating your homes, because this will be as meaningful as your fight for gender equality in the name of the state, by the way. I support the previous speaker from the audience is that we don't have this leadership on the political level. The UN Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women has been celebrating its 45th anniversary. We ratified this convention 20 years ago only. I lived a different life. I experienced different types of situations, and my situations and circumstances were normalized, and therefore we can really see the progress now. Things are changing, and now it has been 9 years that this sexual education has become compulsory in schools, and the first steps have been taken, and young children are becoming to understand that bullying is bad, that abuse and violence is bad, domestic violence is bad. Well, I saw a gay person in 28, and previously I did not have this information. It is very important for children to get this information in schools because they fail to do that in some homes. Well, I will not be resigning from my position. CEDAW committee has been repeating its recommendations and provisions. This is a mechanism for the countries to revise their policies, to revise their teaching curricula in order to prevent the situation when we have gender-based violence or gender-based stereotypes. I think that we still have to do much, but I hope that we will be determined to do that. Aquila, don't you think that you have to resign? Well, I have just started my work. I have worked for 10 years now. This is just the beginning. Of course, this is related to the bubble that I see. I see many young and older people who are happy having discovered gender topics. They understand this gap that we have to fill. I started my work 10 years ago, and I see this change. I see a different market now. I don't have to convince her of the need of the courses. And we see many parents, teachers, and organizations that are looking for ways to build their competences in this area. And I see the change in young people, in students who come and tell stories about their past radical sexist attitudes. and following different social radical media. But then they change. This shows that people can change. Young people can change, and older people can change. This means that people can reconsider their attitudes. Well, we speak about the systemic and structural level, but we also have the personal one. And the type of our reaction to that does not necessarily mean that we have to go into conflict. We should not be calling names or bullying. We know how to argue very well, but we can sometimes agree to disagree and have different attitudes and find space to accept them, not to be afraid to do that. Sometimes we think that we should be silent because we don't want to be conflicting, but we don't have to do that. So this is one of the major elements, and we have the grassroots element. Things that we do every day, our reactions to sexist remarks, for example, our reactions to that. And I hope that communication experts will understand their contribution to this topic when creating headlines, and that in schools, the skills of teachers will be built on how to communicate with parents. We have some minority of concerned parents who are very vocal, and schools don't want to teach such topics and subjects because they don't know how to deal with the concerned opposing parents. We have different schools, and for some schools lack this strength and leadership and power in order to deal with the concerned reactions of parents. Ieva, don't you think that you are investigating a thing that doesn't change? No, I think that one of the clearest changes that we see is the change of the vocabulary, and indicates that things are being recognized, defined, and that we have the rhetoric that you can use. For example, a Me Too scandal with hashtag Me Too. We see many women who finally realized what happened to them. Why Me Too ended? Why did Me Too end? Well, we're not speaking about that. We have a certain words or concepts that emerge in the vocabulary because people finally recognize what really happened to them, and they really recognize what one thing is. And I think the most important thing is that we have a lot of concepts that have a clear meaning when we speak about sexuality, about violence, and all those things. And I believe that this is a great breakthrough and step forward, because we have concepts that are being recognized, that can be used, and people choose to use, and they are helpful for reflecting on people's experience and help people to recognize sexism in people's language and discourse. I think that the word sexism is quite new in the Lithuanian language too. When we find, well, you actually spoke about those positive changes and achievements, about vocabulary, concepts, organizations. Vilma, you could also name some positive advantage in this area and in your work. I only have a wish for the future. 30 seconds. I think that we can implement the change in the area that you work in. if you work in a company, you can do your own change. If you work in the public sphere, you can also make some changes and seek for gender equality. If you are bringing up children, you can also teach them to raise issues. And if you meet people personally who disrespect others or suffer violence, for example, or abuse, you can help that person or teach that person. And there are a lot of resources for doing that. Thank you very much. We had Vilma Gabrieliūtė from the Equal Opportunity Ombudsperson's Office, Ieva Balčiūnė, researcher, Emilis Mikulskis, Vice President of the Lithuanian Students Union, and Equal Opportunities sexuality educator. I think that this is an area that we still have to work further. I wish you every success in doing your work. Thank you.